In the windswept halls of Pacific Allied Naval Academy, a graying combat veteran was about to face the military's most advanced AI system. What started as a temporary instructor assignment took a shocking turn when she came face to face with Valkyrie, an autonomous combat AI that had never been defeated. Commander Elena Vos wasn't your typical substitute teacher. For 20 years, she had spent her life flying obsolete strike fighters in the Pacific conflict, known for surviving battles that claimed younger, more technologically equipped pilots. When she encountered the Academy's drone-trained cadets dismissing her as a relic from the past, she had no idea she was walking into a carefully orchestrated test designed to prove human pilots obsolete. Elena responded with a challenge that would lead to the most important aerial engagement in naval training history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind off Tasman Bay cut across the tarmac at Pacific Allied Naval Academy with the kind of bitter edge that reminded everyone why New Zealand's South Island had been chosen for this sprawling joint training facility. Commander Elena Vos pulled her service cap down against the gusts as she walked toward Hangar 7, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder and her flight case in the other hand. At 43, she moved with the economical precision of someone who had learned to waste neither motion nor energy, her steel-gray eyes taking in every detail of the base that would be her temporary home. The Academy stretched across 2,000 acres of windswept coast, its runways pointing like arrows toward the distant southern Alps. 6 squadrons of the finest pilot candidates from across the Pacific Alliance trained here, flying everything from the latest AI-assisted interceptors to the massive drone carriers that had redefined naval warfare. Elena had read their files during the transport flight from Auckland. Lieutenant Kaito Mura, son of Admiral Mura and the Academy's top-scoring cadet. Cadet Imani Brooks, an electronic warfare prodigy who could jam enemy systems before they knew they were under attack, and a dozen others who represented the best of their generation. None of them had ever flown in actual combat. As she approached the hangar, Elena could hear the familiar sounds of a briefing in progress, the crisp voice of an instructor, the scratch of styluses on tablets, the occasional murmur of a question. Through the massive open doors, she could see rows of sleek aircraft in various stages of maintenance. FA-38 Phantoms with their adaptive camouflage systems, EW-15 Raven electronic warfare craft bristling with antenna arrays, and at the far end of the hangar, covered by a dust-stained tarp, something that made her pause. She recognized the angular lines even under the covering. A Raptor X strike fighter, one of the last human-piloted combat aircraft ever built. Elena had flown them during the Pacific conflict, when drone technology was still unreliable and human pilots had to close with enemy forces at knife-fighting range. The sight of it here, abandoned and forgotten, felt like looking at her own gravestone. Commander Vos. Elena turned to find Admiral Marcus Rourke approaching, his uniform immaculate despite the wind and his expression carefully neutral. He'd met him once before, years ago at a Pentagon briefing where he'd argued passionately for the drone transition program. He was younger than she'd expected for an Academy commandant, probably mid-50s, with the kind of political awareness that kept careers alive in peacetime. Admiral. Elena set down her bags and saluted, reporting as ordered. Rourke returned the salute perfunctorily. "I'll be honest, Commander, this isn't how I'd planned to run final evaluations. Commander Patterson's accident was unfortunate timing."
Elena had read the incident report. Patterson, the Academy's senior flight instructor, had crashed his mountain bike on a training run and broken 3 ribs. Bad luck, but hardly catastrophic, unless you were invested in keeping a particular person away from your cadets. "I understand this is temporary," Elena said, "just until Commander Patterson recovers." "Exactly." Rourke's relief was palpable. The final combat evaluation is already designed. The cadets know the parameters. Really, we just need someone to observe and grade their performance. Nothing too complicated. Elena nodded, but her attention had drifted to the hangar where she could see the cadets filing out of their briefing. They moved with the easy confidence of young people who had never been shot at, their flight suits clean and pressed, tablets tucked under their arms. Lieutenant Mora led the group, his posture radiating the casual authority of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Commander," Rourke followed her gaze. "Is there a problem?" "No problem, Admiral. Just getting oriented." Elena picked up her bags. "Where would you like me to billet?" As Rourke led her toward the Academy's administrative complex, Elena caught fragments of conversation from the departing cadets. They were discussing the upcoming evaluation, debating optimal engagement profiles and AI assistance protocols. Their confidence was absolute, their faith in technology complete. They sounded exactly like she had at their age, before the Pacific conflict had taught her that combat was the art of making life-or-death decisions with incomplete information and failing equipment. The thought both worried and excited her. The Academy's morning simulator sessions took place in Building C, a windowless concrete structure that hummed with the power requirements of dozens of virtual reality pods. Elena arrived at 0600 to observe the cadets' training, her coffee still steaming in the crisp dawn air. Through the observation deck's reinforced glass, she could see rows of simulation capsules, each one a perfect replica of a modern fighter cockpit, surrounded by 360-degree displays and motion actuators. Lieutenant Mora was already in the lead pod, his hands dancing across holographic controls as he engaged simulated enemies in a scenario Elena recognized, the defense of Midway Station, a historical engagement that had become a standard training exercise. On the overhead displays, she could watch his performance in real time, precise maneuvers, textbook tactics, and an efficiency rating that would have made his instructors proud. Impressive, isn't it? Chief Petty Officer Hana Leung had approached quietly, carrying a tablet with maintenance schedules. Elena recognized her from the personnel files, 22 years of service, most of it working on aircraft that no longer existed. Kids got the highest scores in Academy history. Elena watched Mura execute a perfect high-G turn, his virtual aircraft responding with the kind of precision that only existed in computer simulations. What's his actual flight time? Actual? Elena raised an eyebrow. You mean in real aircraft? Maybe 200 hours? Mostly in trainers. They don't need much anymore. The AI handles most of the flying. The simulation ended with Mura achieving a perfect score, his virtual enemies destroyed without a single hit on his aircraft. As he climbed out of the pod, Elena could see other cadets gathering around, clearly impressed. Cadet Imani Brooks was showing her own results on a tablet, another perfect score, this one in electronic warfare scenarios. "Morning, Commander." Elena turned to find Mura approaching, his flight suit unzipped at the collar and his dark hair still bearing the impression of his helmet. Up close, she could see the easy confidence in his eyes, the kind of assurance that came from never having failed at anything important. "Lieutenant Mura," Elena nodded. "Congratulations on your simulation results." "Thank you, ma'am." Mura's smile was practiced, polished. "I understand you'll be observing our final evaluation." "That's correct." "I've been reading about your service record," Mura continued, and Elena could sense the other cadets gathering closer. "Very impressive for that era. Must be quite an adjustment, seeing how much the technology has advanced." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a crashed aircraft. Elena had faced this kind of challenge before, the young pilot testing boundaries, seeing how far they could push. In her experience, there were two ways to handle it, backing down or pushing back. She had never been good at backing down. "Technology has certainly advanced," Elena agreed. "Tell me, Lieutenant, how many combat sorties have you flown?" "Combat sorties?" Mura's smile faltered slightly. "Well, none. None of us have. There hasn't been any need." "I see." Elena kept her voice conversational. "And how many times have you experienced actual system failures, radio blackouts, weapons malfunctions?" "The simulators include failure scenarios. Programmed failures," Elena interrupted gently, "with predetermined solutions. How many times have you had to land a damaged aircraft on a carrier in 30-foot seas? The hangar had gone quiet. Even the maintenance crews had stopped their work to listen. Mura's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His pride clearly stung. With respect, Commander, I don't think experience with obsolete aircraft really applies to modern warfare. We're flying AI-assisted platforms now. The technology has eliminated most of those variables.
Elena studied him for a moment, recognizing something she had seen in mirrors decades ago, the absolute certainty of untested youth. You might be right, Lieutenant. Perhaps we should find out. Ma'am? A practical exercise. You and me, a simple engagement scenario. If modern technology has eliminated the human variables, it should be a straightforward demonstration. The challenge rippled through the gathered cadets like an electric current. Elena could see Imani Brooks exchange glances with her wingman, could hear the subtle shift in breathing that meant money was about to change hands on impromptu bets. This was exactly the kind of moment young pilots lived for, the chance to prove themselves against an older generation. Mura straightened, his confidence returning. I accept, Commander. What parameters? Real aircraft, no simulation, no safety nets. One-on-one engagement, guns only, visual range rules of engagement. Elena's smile was thin, unless you'd prefer to stick with the simulators. The gauntlet could not have been thrown more clearly. Mura's eyes flashed, his pride now fully engaged. Real aircraft sounds perfect, ma'am. When would you like to fly? This afternoon, 1400 hours. Chief Leung, do we have any flyable aircraft available for a visiting instructor? Hana's expression remained carefully neutral, but Elena caught the slight gleam in her eyes. I believe I can find something suitable, Commander. Might take a few hours to prep, but we'll have you airborne. As Elena walked away, she could hear the excited chatter beginning behind her. By lunch, the entire academy would know about the challenge. By evening, they would all understand exactly what the difference was between simulation and reality. The Raptor X that Chief Hana Liang rolled out of the maintenance hangar looked like a relic from another age. Its angular stealth coating was faded and patched in several places. Its cockpit glass bore the slight scratches of countless flights, and the twin engines showed the kind of wear that came from being pushed beyond design limits in actual combat. Next to Lieutenant Mora's pristine FA-38 Phantom, it looked like a museum piece that had wandered onto an active flight line. Elena didn't care. She had flown Raptor X variants for 6 years during the Pacific conflict, and despite their age, she knew their capabilities better than any computer database. More importantly, she knew their limitations and how to work around them. Pre-flight inspection complete, Commander, Hana reported, handing Elena the aircraft log. Engines are solid, weapon systems are calibrated for training rounds, and I took the liberty to update the navigation software. Elena scanned the maintenance log, noting the meticulous attention to detail. Hana had spent hours preparing the aircraft, replacing worn components and fine-tuning systems that hadn't been touched in months. Any issues I should know about? She's got a slight pull to port in a high-G turn, nothing you can't compensate for. And the radar has a blind spot at 270 degrees, about 3 miles out. Hana's expression was carefully neutral, but Elena caught the subtle emphasis on the radar limitation. Information like that could be useful. Across the tarmac, Mura was completing his own pre-flight inspection with the kind of efficiency that came from years of standardized procedures. His Phantom represented the cutting edge of naval aviation, AI-assisted flight controls, predictive threat analysis, and weapon systems that could engage multiple targets simultaneously. It should have been an insurmountable advantage. Should have been. Elena climbed into the Raptor X's cockpit, the familiar weight of the helmet and harness settling around her like an old uniform. The instrument layout was exactly as she remembered. Analog gauges mixed with early-generation digital displays, manual switches for systems that newer aircraft handled automatically. It felt like coming home. The engine spooled up with a growl that vibrated through the airframe, a sound that younger pilots had never heard from their whisper-quiet modern jets. Elena completed her systems checks methodically, each step burned into muscle memory from hundreds of combat sorties. When the tower cleared both aircraft for departure, she was ready.
The engagement zone was a rectangle of airspace 50 miles offshore, high enough to avoid commercial traffic and far enough from shore to prevent any unfortunate encounters with civilian aircraft. Elena arrived first, establishing a combat air patrol pattern at 12,000 feet while waiting for Mora to join her. The late afternoon sun turned the ocean below into a sheet of hammered gold, and for a moment she allowed herself to appreciate the view. "Ghost 1, this is Viper 1. Mora's voice crackled over the tactical frequency, using their call signs for the exercise. "Ready to commence engagement on your signal." Elena checked her weapons display. Training rounds loaded, safeties off, all systems green. "Copy Viper 1, fights on in 3, 2, 1, execute." The two aircraft were separated by 5 miles when the engagement began, closing at a combined speed of nearly 900 knots. Elena watched her radar screen as Mora's Phantom appeared as a bright contact, its AI-assisted systems already calculating optimal attack vectors. Standard doctrine called for him to launch a beyond visual range missile shot, but the exercise parameters restricted them to guns-only engagement at close range, which meant he would try to get behind her and stay there.
Mira opened with a textbook maneuver, pulling his Phantom into a climbing spiral designed to gain altitude advantage while forcing Elena into an energy-depleting defensive turn. It was exactly what she had expected. A move optimized by computer analysis and proven effective in thousands of simulations. Elena rolled inverted and pulled toward the ocean. The maneuver violated every principle of energy management that modern pilots learned in their first week of training. Instead of matching Mira's climb, she deliberately blew altitude and airspeed, appearing to fall into the exact trap he had set for her. Her radar warning receiver screamed as his aircraft's targeting system locked onto her, painting her with the electronic signature that would have preceded a missile launch in actual combat. But Elena wasn't flying by modern doctrine. She was flying like someone who had learned that survival often meant doing exactly what the enemy didn't expect. At 800 feet above the ocean, she bottomed out her dive and pulled into a brutal 7G turn that would have torn the wings off a lesser aircraft. The Raptor X groaned under the stress, its airframe protesting the punishment, but Elena had flown these maneuvers before when failure meant death rather than embarrassment. As she came around, she could see Mira's Phantom high above, still positioned for the attack that should have been inevitable. "Viper 1, you've lost sight," Elena transmitted, her voice calm despite the G-forces compressing her chest. "Recommend you check your 6. The silence over the radio told her everything she needed to know. Mira's AI-assisted systems had calculated her most probable flight path and positioned him accordingly, but they had calculated based on optimal tactics. They had never accounted for a pilot willing to sacrifice altitude and energy for position, to deliberately appear vulnerable in order to create an opportunity. Elena pulled her nose up and found Mira's aircraft silhouetted against the sky, exactly where she had expected it to be. Her targeting system growled as it achieved lock, and she squeezed the trigger for a sustained burst of training rounds that would have crippled his aircraft in actual combat. "Guns, guns, guns," she called out, the traditional announcement of a simulated weapons hit. "Viper 1, you are dead." The flight back to base was conducted in radio silence, which Elena appreciated. She understood the shock that Mira was undoubtedly experiencing, the sudden realization that all his training and technology had failed him when faced with an opponent who fought by different rules. It was a lesson that every combat pilot learned eventually, though most were fortunate enough to learn it in training rather than when their life depended on it. As they entered the landing pattern, Elena could see crowds of personnel gathered along the flight line. Word of the engagement had clearly spread, and everyone wanted to see the results for themselves. She set the Raptor X down with the kind of precision that came from landing on carrier decks in rough seas, the aircraft touching down exactly on the designated spot. When she climbed out of the cockpit, Chief Hana Lung was waiting with a knowing smile and a clipboard full of post-flight paperwork. In the distance, Elena could see Mura surrounded by his fellow cadets, their voices animated as they demanded details of the engagement. "How'd the old girl handle, Commander?" Hana asked, running her hands along the Raptor X's wing as if checking for damage. Elena removed her helmet and shook out her hair, feeling the wind from the ocean cut across the flight line. "Like she remembered what she was built for, Chief. Like she remembered what real combat feels like." As she walked toward the debrief building, Elena could hear fragments of conversation from the gathering crowd of cadets and instructors.
The word impossible came up several times, along with requests for detailed analysis of her tactics. She understood their confusion. Everything they had been taught suggested that her victory should have been impossible. But Elena had learned long ago that impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been programmed into a computer. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Admiral Rourke's office occupied the top floor of the Academy's command tower, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the training complex and the Tasman Sea beyond. Elena stood at attention before his desk, though the Admiral had gestured for her to sit twice already. After yesterday's engagement with Lieutenant Mura, she suspected this meeting wasn't going to be a casual conversation. "Commander Vos," Rourke began, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who had spent the night reconsidering his options. "Your performance yesterday was unexpected." Elena kept her expression neutral. "The lieutenant flew well, sir. He just wasn't prepared for unconventional tactics."
Unconventional. Rourke tapped his stylus against his tablet, the sound sharp in the quiet office. That's one way to put it. My staff has spent considerable time analyzing your engagement profile. The maneuvers you executed would have been classified as reckless by any current doctrine, but effective. In this instance, yes. Rourke set down his tablet and leaned back in his chair. Which brings me to why you're here. The final evaluation is scheduled for tomorrow, and I've decided to make some adjustments to the scenario. Elena had been expecting this. Her victory over Mura had upset more than just one cadet's pride. It had challenged the fundamental assumptions that govern modern naval aviation training. Rourke couldn't let that challenge go unanswered, not with his career built on the transition to AI-assisted warfare. "What adjustments, sir?" Rourke activated his wall display, showing a three-dimensional tactical scenario over a cluster of virtual islands. The exercise will simulate a fleet defense situation, multiple attack vectors, coordinated enemy strikes, the full complexity of modern naval warfare. The cadets will be responsible for protecting 3 carrier task forces while eliminating hostile forces. Elena studied the display, noting the positioning of friendly and enemy units. It was a challenging scenario, but well within the capabilities of a squadron of trained pilots flying modern aircraft. "And my role in this exercise, Admiral?" "You'll be leading the defense, of course. After yesterday's demonstration, the cadets are eager to see how your methods perform in a complex engagement." Rourke's smile was thin. "But there's one additional element I should mention." The display shifted, highlighting a new contact at the edge of the engagement zone. The icon was different from the others, sleeker, more angular, with performance parameters that made Elena's eyes narrow. "Valkyrie," Rourke said with evident satisfaction. "Our most advanced autonomous combat AI. It's been designed to simulate the capabilities of next-generation enemy aircraft with processing power that can calculate and counter any known tactical approach in real time." Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same sensation she had experienced before every major engagement during the Pacific conflict. This wasn't about training anymore. This was about proving a point. Rourke was betting his reputation that AI-driven warfare was the future, and he needed her to fail publicly to validate that belief. "Valkyrie has never been defeated in a training exercise," Rourke continued. "It adapts to every tactic, counters every strategy, and learns from every engagement. The cadets will have full access to their AI-assisted systems, of course. We wouldn't want to handicap them unnecessarily." "Of course not," Elena replied evenly. "And my aircraft for this exercise?" "The same Raptor X you flew yesterday. Chief Leong has assured me it's fully operational." Rourke's expression suggested he considered this a significant handicap. "Unless you'd prefer something more modern." Elena almost smiled. Rourke thought he was stacking the deck against her, but he didn't understand the advantage of flying an aircraft that predated most modern AI databases. Valkyrie might be able to predict and counter every known tactical approach, but Elena suspected it had never encountered a Raptor X flown by someone who had learned to fight without computer assistance. "The Raptor X will be fine, Admiral. What are the rules of engagement?" "Full weapon simulation, no range restrictions. The exercise begins at 0800 hours and continues until either all hostile forces are eliminated or the fleet is destroyed." Rourke leaned forward. "Commander, I want to be clear about the stakes here. This evaluation will determine whether the Academy continues with traditional pilot training or transitions fully to AI-assisted operations. The Navy is watching this closely. Elena understood perfectly. Win, and she might preserve a place for human pilots in the future of naval warfare. Lose, and the last vestiges of her era would be swept away by the tide of technological progress. Understood, sir. I'll need access to the full tactical briefing materials and the opportunity to coordinate with the cadet pilots. Of course, Master Chief Hale will provide you with everything you need. Rook stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Good luck, Commander. You're going to need it. As Elena left the Admiral's office, she found Master Chief Owen Hale waiting in the corridor outside. He was a compact man in his 50s with weathered hands of someone who had spent decades working on aircraft systems, and his expression suggested he had been listening to at least part of the conversation. Commander, Hale said quietly, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the elevator, might want to take a look at these. He handed her a data pad containing what appeared to be maintenance logs and performance analyses. At first glance, they seemed routine, but as Elena scrolled through the files, she began to notice patterns in Valkyrie's operational history. Interesting reading, she murmured. AI's got perfect tactical execution, Hale agreed, his voice carefully neutral, but it's got habits, just like any pilot. Tendencies, things it does the same way every time because the algorithms say it's optimal.
Elena nodded, understanding the implications. Every AI system, no matter how sophisticated, operated according to programmed parameters. If those parameters could be identified and exploited, even the most advanced system might be vulnerable to the right kind of pressure. Master Chief, I'm going to need detailed specifications on every aircraft the cadets will be flying, and I'll want to review the tactical briefing materials personally. Already pulled together, ma'am. Conference Room 3 is reserved for you at 1900 hours. Hale's expression remained professional, but Elena caught the slight gleam in his eyes. Should be everything you need to prepare for tomorrow. As they reached the elevator, Elena realized that she wasn't facing this challenge alone. Hale's subtle assistance, Chief Leung's meticulous preparation of the Raptor X, even the cadets' grudging curiosity about her methods, they all represented something that no AI could quantify or predict. They represented the human element that might make all the difference. The Academy's main briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as the graduating cadets filed in for the pre-mission planning session. Elena had arrived early, using the time to study the tactical displays and review the performance profiles of each pilot she would be leading into the exercise. Lieutenant Mora entered with his usual confident stride, but Elena noticed the subtle changes in his bearing, the way he avoided direct eye contact, the slight tension in his shoulders that suggested yesterday's engagement was still bothering him. Cadet Imani Brooks took a seat in the front row, her tablet already displaying preliminary mission data, and her dark eyes sharp with curiosity. She had spent the previous evening analyzing Elena's victory over Mora, and Elena suspected the young electronic warfare specialist had drawn some uncomfortable conclusions about the limitations of AI-assisted combat systems. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Elena began, activating the room's main display. "Tomorrow's exercise will test everything you've learned about fleet defense and coordinated air operations. More importantly, it will test your ability to adapt when your primary systems fail." The tactical display showed a complex scenario: 3 carrier task forces arranged in a defensive triangle, with hostile contacts approaching from multiple vectors. At the edge of the screen, the distinctive icon representing Valkyrie waited like a predator evaluating its prey. "The scenario is straightforward. Enemy forces will attempt to break through our defensive perimeter and attack the fleet. Our job is to stop them. Standard doctrine calls for layered defense with AI-assisted targeting and coordinated missile strikes to eliminate threats at maximum range." Lieutenant Mora raised his hand. "Commander, with respect, that's exactly the kind of engagement our systems are designed for. The AI assistance provides real-time threat assessment and optimal targeting solutions. We should be able to handle this scenario using standard procedures. I nodded. You're absolutely right, Lieutenant. Under normal circumstances, this would be a textbook exercise, but I want you to consider what happens when circumstances aren't normal. She manipulated the display, highlighting the performance parameters for Valkyrie. The numbers were sobering: speed, maneuverability, and weapons capabilities that exceeded anything in the current inventory. Valkyrie represents next-generation threat technology. Its AI is designed to predict and counter our standard tactical responses. If we fight this engagement by the book, we will lose. Cadet Brooks leaned forward. Then what do you suggest, ma'am? Elena had spent the previous evening developing her answer to that exact question, drawing on 20 years of experience fighting enemies who often had technological advantages. We do what humans have always done when facing superior technology. We change the rules. The room fell silent as Elena outlined her unconventional approach. Instead of maintaining the predictable defensive formations that Valkyrie would expect, she proposed breaking the cadets into irregular attack groups with overlapping but non-standard responsibilities. Rather than relying on AI-assisted targeting, she wanted them to switch to manual weapon systems at critical moments, creating variables that enemy computers couldn't predict. "This is insane," muttered Cadet Jackson from the back row. "You're asking us to deliberately handicap ourselves against the most advanced AI the Navy has ever built." "I'm asking you to think like pilots instead of system operators. Your AI assistance is a tool, not a crutch. When that tool fails, and it will fail, what matters is your ability to adapt and improvise." Lieutenant Mora's expression had grown increasingly skeptical as Elena outlined her plans. "Commander, with all due respect, these tactics might have worked in your era, but modern warfare is about precision and coordination. Valkyrie will calculate our optimal responses and position itself accordingly. Random improvisation isn't a strategy." Elena studied him for a moment, recognizing the same confidence she had seen yesterday before their engagement. "You're right that Valkyrie will calculate optimal responses, Lieutenant. The question is, optimal responses to what?" She manipulated the display again, showing a series of engagement scenarios. Every AI system operates according to programmed parameters. It analyzes known tactics, predicts probable responses, and positions itself for maximum effectiveness. But what happens when we do something that's not in its database?
Cadet Brooks spoke up. "You're talking about exploiting blind spots in the programming." "Exactly. Valkyrie is designed to counter every known tactical approach, but it can't counter what it hasn't been programmed to recognize." Elena met each cadet's eyes in turn. "The Pacific conflict taught me that survival often depends on doing the unexpected, even when, especially when, it seems irrational." The debate continued for another hour, with the cadets arguing among themselves about the merits of Elena's unconventional approach. Lieutenant Mura remained skeptical, but Elena could see that others were beginning to understand the logic behind her methods. Cadet Brooks, in particular, seemed intrigued by the possibilities of manually controlling her electronic warfare systems. Finally, Elena called for a decision. "I'm not ordering you to follow my approach. Each of you has the right to fly this mission according to your training and instincts. But I'm asking you to trust that sometimes the best way forward isn't the most obvious one." One by one, the cadets agreed to attempt her unconventional tactics, though Elena could see the uncertainty in their faces. They were being asked to abandon everything they had been taught about modern aerial warfare, to trust in human intuition over computer-assisted precision. As the briefing concluded, Lieutenant Mura approached Elena privately. "Commander, I want you to know that I'll follow your lead tomorrow, but I think you're making a mistake.
Valkyrie isn't just another AI. It's been designed specifically to counter human unpredictability. Elena appreciated his honesty. You might be right, Lieutenant, but I'd rather lose flying like a pilot than lose flying like a computer. As the cadets filed out of the briefing room, Elena remained behind to study the tactical displays one more time. Tomorrow would test more than just their flying skills. It would determine whether human pilots still had a place in the future of warfare, or whether they had become as obsolete as the aircraft she flew. The pre-dawn briefing was conducted in near silence, with the cadets running final systems checks and reviewing flight plans under the stark fluorescent lights of the ready room. Elena could feel the tension radiating from each pilot as they prepared for an exercise that felt more like actual combat than any training scenario they had previously encountered. At precisely 8:00 hours, 8 aircraft lifted off from the Academy's primary runway and formed up over the Tasman Sea. Elena's Raptor X took point, flanked by Lieutenant Mura in his FA-38 Phantom and Cadet Brooks in her EW-15 Raven electronic warfare platform. The remaining cadets spread out in the loose formation Elena had specified, their modern aircraft gleaming in the morning sunlight. All flights, this is Ghost Lead, Elena transmitted using her call sign from the Pacific conflict. Exercise commences in 60 seconds. Remember, when your computers tell you to do one thing, consider doing something else entirely. The simulated carrier task forces appeared on their tactical displays as blue icons arranged in a triangular defensive pattern 30 miles to the southeast. Enemy contacts began materializing at the edge of sensor range, red triangles moving with the purposeful precision of computer-controlled units. And somewhere among them, still invisible to their sensors, Valkyrie waited. Contact, bearing 090, range 40 miles and closing, reported Cadet Morrison from his position on the eastern flank. Multiple bandits, estimated 8 aircraft. Elena checked her own displays, noting the coordination of the approaching enemy forces. They were moving in perfect formation, their attack vectors optimized for maximum pressure on the defensive line. It was exactly the kind of textbook assault that the cadets had trained to counter. All flights, implement Plan Delta, Elena ordered, referring to the unconventional tactics they had discussed the previous evening. Break formation and engage targets of opportunity. The response was immediate chaos. Instead of maintaining their defensive line, the Academy aircraft scattered like startled birds, each pilot selecting individual targets and attacking from unexpected angles. To anyone watching from the control room, it must have looked like a complete breakdown of military discipline, which was exactly what Elena had intended. Goes 2, tally hostile at Angels 15, Morrison reported, his voice tight with concentration as he maneuvered his Phantom into an attack position. Engaging with guns. Elena watched her tactical display as the engagement unfolded, noting how the enemy AI units struggled to adapt to the irregular attack patterns. They had been programmed to counter coordinated defensive tactics, not the seemingly random aggression that the cadets were displaying. Then, Valkyrie announced its presence. The first indication was Cadet Jackson's Hornet disappearing from the tactical display without warning, its icon simply vanishing as if it had never existed. No missile launch, no radar warning, no indication of what had destroyed it. "Jackson's down," Brooks reported, her voice sharp with alarm. "No indication of hostile action, no warnings, it happened." Elena felt the familiar chill of combat, the sudden awareness that the exercise had just become deadly serious. Valkyrie wasn't playing by the same rules as the other AI units. It was operating on a different level of capability.
Ghost Lead, this is Control. Master Chief Hale's voice crackled over the command frequency. Valkyrie has entered the engagement zone. Recommend extreme caution. Elena keyed her radio. All flights. Valkyrie is active. Assume any hostile contact could be the primary threat. Switch to manual targeting systems and maintain unpredictable flight paths. The warning came too late for Cadet Williams. His FA-18 Super Hornet had been moving to engage what appeared to be a standard enemy fighter when something struck it from an impossible angle, destroying it so quickly that Williams never had time to react. On the tactical display, Elena could see a new contact appear briefly where his aircraft had been, then vanish again into electronic noise. 2 aircraft down in 90 seconds, Mira transmitted, his usual confidence replaced by genuine concern. This thing is hunting us. Elena pulled her Raptor X into a climbing turn, using her aircraft's limited stealth capabilities to mask her position while she studied the tactical situation. Valkyrie was moving through the engagement zone like a shark among minnows, appearing just long enough to eliminate a target before disappearing back into the electronic clutter of the exercise area. "Brooks, can you get a fix on this thing?" Elena asked. "Negative, Ghost Lead. It's using some kind of adaptive camouflage system that shifts frequencies faster than I can track. Every time I think I have a lock, it changes signature." The frustration in Brooks's voice was evident. "It's like trying to catch smoke." Elena watched another cadet aircraft vanish from her display, followed seconds later by the brief appearance and disappearance of Valkyrie's sensor ghost. The AI was systematically dismantling her formation, using capabilities that shouldn't have existed in any known aircraft. "All flights, this is Ghost Lead," Elena transmitted, her voice calm despite the carnage unfolding around her. "Cease offensive operations and form up on my position. We're changing tactics." As the surviving cadets maneuvered to join her, Elena began to see the pattern in Valkyrie's attacks. The AI was operating according to optimal engagement protocols, selecting targets based on threat assessment and positioning itself for maximum tactical advantage. It was fighting the perfect battle according to every known principle of aerial warfare, which meant it was predictable in ways that its programmers had never intended. Elena waited until the 4 surviving aircraft had formed up in a loose diamond formation before implementing the most dangerous part of her plan. Looking at her tactical display, she could see Lieutenant Mura in his Phantom, Cadet Brooks in her electronic warfare platform, and 2 other cadets whose aircraft represented the last hope of preventing Valkyrie from achieving a perfect victory. "All flights, this is Ghost Lead. What I'm about to ask you to do will violate every principle of modern air combat doctrine. We're going to go dark." "Ma'am?" Mira's voice carried a note of disbelief. "Complete electronic shutdown. All AI assistants, all targeting computers, all data links. We're going to fly this engagement like it's 1945. The silence over the radio spoke volumes. Elena was asking them to abandon the technological advantages that had defined their entire training, to fight a superior enemy using nothing but their own instincts and skills. "Commander," Brooks spoke up, "without our electronic systems, we won't be able to coordinate attacks or share targeting data. We'll be blind." "Not blind. We'll be flying invisible. Valkyrie's primary advantage is its ability to predict and counter our actions based on electronic signatures and data patterns. Without those signatures, we become much harder to track and impossible to predict." Elena demonstrated by shutting down her own systems, feeling the Raptor X's cockpit displays go dark except for the basic hyperflight instruments. It was like stepping back in time to an era when pilots flew by instinct rather than computer assistance. "Follow my lead," she ordered. "Maintain visual formation and prepare for manual weapons engagement." One by one, the cadet aircraft went dark, their electronic signatures vanishing from the electromagnetic spectrum. Elena led them in a descending spiral toward the ocean, using the terrain masking effect of the island chain to break up their radar profiles. For several minutes, they flew in radio silence, following Elena's hand signals as she positioned them for what she hoped would be a decisive counterattack. In the distance, she could see explosions marking the destruction of simulated friendly units as Valkyrie continued its methodical assault on the carrier task forces. Then, she saw her opportunity. Valkyrie appeared on the horizon, a sleek delta-wing aircraft that moved with inhuman precision as it maneuvered to engage the remaining defensive forces. It was positioning itself for another perfect attack, its AI calculating optimal firing solutions based on the predictable responses of its remaining opponents. Elena keyed her radio once. "Now." The 4 dark aircraft rose from the ocean like ghosts, their engines suddenly blazing to full power as they climbed toward Valkyrie's position. Without electronic assistance, their attack was ragged and uncoordinated, more like a brawl than a precision strike.
It was exactly what Elena had planned.
Valkyrie's sensors detected the incoming threats, but its targeting computers struggled to achieve locks on aircraft that weren't broadcasting electronic signatures. More importantly, the AI couldn't predict their attack vectors because the human pilots weren't following any recognizable tactical doctrine. Lieutenant Mura attacked from the south, his Phantom screaming through a high G-turn that no computer would have recommended. Cadet Brooks came in from the east, her electronic warfare platform suddenly blazing with jamming signals that had been prepared manually rather than generated by AI. The other two cadets approached from impossible angles, their aircraft pushed beyond normal performance parameters by pilots who were flying on pure instinct. Elena came in from directly above, her Raptor X diving at an angle that would have been suicide against any human opponent. But Valkyrie wasn't human. It was a machine that operated according to logical parameters, and Elena's attack violated every logical assumption about aerial combat. Her targeting system achieved lock just as Valkyrie began evasive maneuvers, its AI finally recognizing the threat, but unable to counter attacks that made no tactical sense. Elena squeezed the trigger, sending a stream of simulated gunfire into the enemy aircraft's flight path. "Guns, guns, guns," she transmitted. "Valkyrie is hit."
Not straight at them, Elena corrected, straight through them. Valkyrie's AI is optimized for aerial combat, but it's still constrained by physical laws and safety protocols. If we can force it into a situation where any logical response results in mutual destruction, we might create enough confusion to break its attack pattern. The plan was audacious to the point of madness. Elena proposed splitting their formation at the last possible second, using their aircraft like guided missiles to force Valkyrie into impossible choices. The AI would have to decide whether to engage targets that were clearly on suicide runs or to continue its primary mission of attacking the fleet. "Commander," Mura spoke up, his voice carefully controlled. "This plan has a very low probability of success." "I know." Elena checked her weapon systems one final time, ensuring that everything was ready for what might be their last engagement. But it also has a very low probability of complete failure. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. The hostile contacts appeared on the horizon like a storm front, their formation perfect and their approach calculated for maximum destructive efficiency. Valkyrie led the formation, its sleek profile unmistakable even at distance, while its AI wingmen spread out in a pattern designed to overwhelm any conventional defense. "All flights, execute on my mark," Elena transmitted. "Remember, commitment is everything. If any of us hesitates, we all die." Elena pushed her throttles to military power, feeling the Raptor X surge forward with the kind of acceleration that pressed her back into her ejection seat. To her left and right, the cadet aircraft matched her speed, their pilots committed to a course of action that defied every principle of self-preservation they had been taught. Valkyrie's formation began evasive maneuvers as they approached, the AI calculating optimal intercept courses and preparing to engage targets that should have been easy prey. But Elena's formation wasn't behaving like prey. They were behaving like projectiles, aimed directly at the heart of the enemy formation with no regard for their own survival. At 2-mile separation, Elena gave the signal. The 4 Academy aircraft split in different directions, each one aimed at a different section of Valkyrie's formation. Elena dove toward the AI command aircraft itself, her Raptor X screaming through the air at speeds that made precise maneuvering nearly impossible. Valkyrie began evasive action, but Elena matched every move, staying locked onto an intercept course that would result in mutual destruction if neither aircraft changed direction. For the first time in its operational history, Valkyrie faced a tactical problem without an optimal solution. Its programming demanded mission completion, but also included self-preservation protocols that prohibited unnecessary risks. Elena's approach violated both parameters simultaneously. The AI hesitated for exactly 0.3 seconds, long enough for Elena to achieve weapons lock and fire a sustained burst that crippled Valkyrie's flight systems.
Around her, the other cadets executed similar attacks, their seemingly suicidal approaches allowing them to score hits on enemy aircraft that had never been touched by conventional tactics. "All enemy contacts destroyed," Control announced as the last hostile icon vanished from the tactical display. "Exercise complete. Fleet successfully defended." Elena pulled out of her dive, feeling the G-forces compress her chest as she fought to regain control of her aircraft. Around her, the surviving cadets were whooping with excitement, their voices filling the radio with the kind of jubilation that only came from achieving the impossible. But Elena felt only exhaustion. They had won, but the cost of that victory was a reminder of how thin the line was between success and catastrophe in real combat. The Academy's main briefing room was packed beyond capacity when Elena entered for the post-exercise debrief. Word of Valkyrie's first-ever defeat had spread through the entire base, drawing not only the cadet pilots and their instructors, but also senior officers from across the Pacific Fleet who had flown in specifically to hear the results. Admiral Rourke stood at the podium, his expression carefully neutral as he waited for the room to quiet. Elena took a seat in the front row, flanked by Lieutenant Mura and Cadet Brooks, both of whom still showed the effects of their adrenaline-fueled victory. The other surviving cadets sat nearby, their faces reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief at what they had accomplished. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rourke began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed room, "this morning's exercise has produced results that will require significant analysis and review. For the first time in its operational history, our Valkyrie combat AI was defeated in a training scenario." A murmur ran through the assembled officers, many of whom had worked on the AI project or had seen its previous demonstrations. Valkyrie had been considered the pinnacle of autonomous combat technology, a system that could counter any known tactical approach with mathematical precision. The exercise data shows that unconventional tactics executed by manually controlled aircraft were able to exploit vulnerabilities in the AI's decision-making process. Commander Vos and her cadet pilots achieved this victory through methods that violated every principle of modern air combat doctrine.
Elena stood when Rourke called her name, walking to the podium with the same steady pace she had used when approaching combat zones during the Pacific conflict. She looked out at the assembled faces, seeing skepticism, curiosity, and in some cases, genuine respect. The victory this morning wasn't achieved through superior technology or perfect execution, Elena began. It was achieved because human pilots were willing to do something that computers consider illogical: sacrifice optimal efficiency for tactical surprise. She activated the room's display system, showing the engagement data from the exercise. The tactical plot looked chaotic compared to the clean formations and calculated maneuvers that characterized AI-assisted combat, but it had been effective in ways that no computer model could have predicted. Valkyrie failed because it assumed that human pilots would always choose the optimal response to any given situation, Elena continued. But humans don't always choose the optimal response. Sometimes we choose the desperate response, or the impossible response, or the response that makes no sense to anyone watching, including ourselves. Lieutenant Mura stood up from his seat. "Commander, I want to publicly acknowledge that everything I thought I knew about air combat was proven wrong this morning. The tactics you taught us shouldn't have worked, but they did. They worked because they relied on something that no AI can replicate: the willingness to take calculated risks based on incomplete information." Cadet Brooks nodded in agreement. "The electronic warfare systems I've been trained to use are incredibly sophisticated, but they all operate according to predictable parameters. When Commander Vos asked us to shut down our AI assistants and fly manually, it was terrifying, but it was also liberating. We became unpredictable because we stopped trying to be perfect." The room erupted in discussion as officers began debating the implications of what they had witnessed. Elena could hear fragments of conversation about revised training protocols, the integration of manual flying skills into the curriculum, and the need to balance technological capability with human adaptability. Admiral Rourke raised his hand for silence. "The results of this exercise will be forwarded to Fleet Command for review and analysis. However, I want to make one thing clear. This was a training scenario with specific parameters.
The real-world applications of these tactics remain to be seen. Elena understood the subtext of Rourke's comments. He was protecting his own reputation while acknowledging the undeniable success of her methods. It was a politician's response, but it was also an opening for future discussions about the role of human pilots in modern warfare. As the briefing concluded, Elena found herself surrounded by cadets and junior officers asking questions about her tactics and her experience during the Pacific conflict. She answered as many as she could, but her attention was drawn to Chief Hannah Leung, who was waiting patiently at the edge of the crowd. "Commander," Hannah said when Elena finally reached her, "Admiral Rourke wants to see you in his office, something about a permanent assignment." Elena smiled, understanding that her temporary posting to the Academy was about to become something much more significant. The Navy might be slow to change, but it wasn't stupid. When someone proved that the impossible was merely improbable, smart organizations found ways to learn from that lesson. "Chief, how long would it take to get more Raptor X aircraft operational?" "For a full squadron? Maybe 6 months if we can get the parts and authorization?" Hannah's eyes gleamed with the enthusiasm that came from working on aircraft that mattered again. "Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Elena looked back at the cadets, who were still debating the finer points of manual combat tactics with the intensity of converts discussing their new religion. They had learned something important today, that human intuition was still the most powerful weapon in any pilot's arsenal. "I'm thinking the Academy needs to teach both kinds of flying, Chief. The kind that computers do better than humans, and the kind that only humans can do at all." 6 months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of Hangar 7, watching as the morning flight operations commenced with an efficiency that would have been impossible when she first arrived at the Academy. Below her, 2 distinct types of aircraft prepared for departure: sleek, modern fighters equipped with the latest AI-assisted systems, and a squadron of restored Raptor X strike fighters that looked like museum pieces brought back to life. The contrast was deliberate. The Academy's new integrated combat training program paired every cadet with both types of aircraft, teaching them to seamlessly transition between AI-assisted precision and manual improvisation. It was a radical departure from the previous curriculum, but one that was mandated by Fleet Command after extensive analysis of the Valkyrie exercise. "Morning, Commander," Lieutenant Mura said as he joined Elena on the observation deck. He wore the insignia of an instructor pilot now, his confidence tempered by the hard-won wisdom of someone who had learned the difference between simulation and reality. "Ready for today's demonstration?"
Elena nodded, checking her watch. In 30 minutes, a delegation from Pacific Fleet Command would arrive to observe the new training program in action. Admiral Rourke had been reassigned to Fleet Headquarters, where his expertise in AI systems was considered valuable but not decisive. His replacement, Admiral Sarah Chen, was a former Raptor pilot who understood the value of both technological advancement and human adaptability. "How are the cadets adapting to the dual-track training?" Elena asked. "Better than expected," Mura replied. "The ones who were initially skeptical about manual flying have become some of its strongest advocates. There's something about mastering both approaches that makes them better pilots overall." Through the hangar's windows, Elena could see Cadet Brooks conducting a pre-flight inspection of her assigned Raptor X. The young electronic warfare specialist had become one of the program's most enthusiastic participants, discovering that manual jamming techniques could be far more effective than computer-generated approaches in certain situations. Chief Hannah Leung approached with the tablet containing the morning's flight schedules. "Commander, the visiting delegation has requested a full demonstration of both manual and AI-assisted combat scenarios. Admiral Chen specifically wants to see how quickly pilots can transition between the 2 modes." Elena smiled. "Then we'll give them a demonstration they won't forget. Is Go Squadron ready?" "Ready and eager," Hannah confirmed. "The new pilots have been asking when they get to fly against more Valkyrie-class AIs." The Ghost Squadron was Elena's innovation, a mixed unit of human-piloted and AI-controlled aircraft that trained together in scenarios that required both technological precision and human intuition. The pilots learned to work alongside artificial intelligence without becoming dependent on it, while the AI systems were exposed to the kind of unpredictable human behavior that had defeated Valkyrie. "There's one more thing," Mara said, his expression becoming more serious. "Fleet intelligence has been analyzing combat data from recent engagements in the South China Sea.
Enemy forces are beginning to use AI systems specifically designed to counter our standard tactics. Elena had been expecting this development. Military technology was an endless arms race, with each advance prompting counter-advances from potential adversaries. The fact that enemy forces were adapting to AI-assisted combat meant that human unpredictability was becoming even more valuable. "How long before those systems make it into their frontline units?" she asked. 12 to 18 months according to the intelligence estimates. But Commander, the really interesting part is that their AI systems appear to be even more rigid than Valkyrie was. They're optimized for defeating our current tactics, which means they might be even more vulnerable to unconventional approaches. Elena watched as the first flight of mixed aircraft took off from the Academy's runway, the modern fighters and restored Raptors flying in perfect formation despite their different capabilities. It was a sight that would have been impossible a year ago, but it had become routine under the new training doctrine. "Then we'll be ready for them," she said. "The cadets graduating from this program will be the first generation of pilots trained to think like humans and fight like computers, or vice versa, depending on what the situation requires." As the delegation's transport aircraft appeared on the horizon, Elena reflected on how much had changed since her arrival at the Academy. She had come here as a substitute instructor, a temporary solution to an unexpected problem, but she was staying as something much more important, a bridge between the technological future and the human past, ensuring that the art of flying would never be completely surrendered to machines. The future of naval aviation would be shaped by pilots who understood the precision of artificial intelligence and the creativity of human intuition. It would be a future where technology served the pilot rather than replacing them, where the most advanced weapon systems were guided by the most ancient of human traits, the ability to adapt, improvise, and overcome. As the first mixed formation of aircraft disappeared over the horizon, Elena smiled. The old Raptor X fighters might look obsolete next to their high-tech wingmen, but they carried something that no computer could replicate. The knowledge that sometimes the best way forward was the way that made no sense to anyone except the human being willing to try it. The substitute had become permanent, and the future was flying in formation with the past. This story explores the enduring value of human adaptability in an age of technological supremacy, showing that the most advanced AI systems can still be defeated by the oldest of human traits, the willingness to do the unexpected when survival depends on it.
Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.